The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jamie Hughes, and I'd like to welcome all of you to the Using Social Media to Reach Participants webinar. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to review a few administrative items and let you know how you can participate in today's web event. All participants should be able to hear the audio and view the presentation slides. You may participate in today's webinar by accessing the microphone and speaker function through your computer or by using the toll-free phone option. This information may be found in the GoToWebinar interface in the control panel on the right side of your computer screen. I'd like for everyone to quickly turn your attention to the GoToWebinar attendees interface, which is made up of two parts. That's the viewer window on the left, which allows for you to see everything the presenter will share on their screen, and the control panel on the right. Within the control panel is how you can participate in today's web event. By clicking the orange arrow that is found at the top right corner of your screen, you can open and close your control panel. And to keep your control panel open or visible from the View menu, ensure that the Auto Hide Control Panel option is not selected. Questions may be typed in the question box at any time during the presentation. Simply type in your question and click Send. This will be an interactive webinar, and there will be a question and answer phases throughout the webinar presentation. We don't anticipate any issues with today's event, but if for any reason technical difficulties arise for this event and audio and/or screen views are lost, please attempt to dial in and log back into this webinar through your original invite. If access is still unable to be regained, please check your email inbox for updates regarding rescheduling of this webinar event. We will now begin the webinar presentation, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending today.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie. Today we're going to be talking to you about using social media to reach participants. So my name is Katy Suellentrop. I'm the Director of State Support here at the National Campaign to Prevent Teen and Unplanned Pregnancy. And I'm joined by my colleague Jessica Pika, who is our Assistant Director of Communications. We want to say thank you for joining us. Our contact information is on the screen. And Jessica manages all of our Twitter handles for the National Campaign and our teen site, which is called stayteen.org. So you can always follow her personally or via our corporate or teen website. Before we get started, you're in listen-only mode, so your phone is actually muted already. We're going to have a number of check-ins, as Jamie mentioned, throughout the presentation. So we're trying to make this as interactive as we can, and we encourage you to chat in your responses using the chat function at the bottom right of your screen. And we will be reading those chats aloud so that we're going to try to share across grantees. Also, please feel free to write in questions as we go. We'll try to answer as many of those as we can, and we'll make sure that we're breaking for questions and answers. For technical support, there will be someone else answering those questions as well. And you should have received these slides and a tip sheet that accompanies this webinar. If you have we'll be referencing the tip sheet as well, and I would encourage you, if you haven't read it yet, to take a look at the conclusion of this webinar. So by the end of this session, we're hoping that you'll be able to identify at least 2 ways that you can use social media to enhance your work with adolescents. We're going to be talking about a variety of social media strategies, and so we hope that you can describe at least 2 social media strategies that you can use to connect with adolescents in your programs and or community. And then we're going to be spending some time thinking about how you develop a social media plan, which will then allow you to evaluate whether or not what you're doing is working and how to evaluate the success of your social media strategy. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the 5 most commonly used social media platforms, and then we're going to tell you a little bit about who is using them as of this month, with a note that the data on this are changing sort of as we speak. So we have included in your handouts that you received was a resource and references document, and in there is links to all of the references that we use to gather these data, and you can always look at them. If you're writing a grant proposal or something and you need to know exactly who is using a particular platform, those numbers are updated quite frequently. We'll also be talking about which of the channels, if any, are the right fit for you, your program, and your audience. we're going to present some examples of what who has been using social media really well, and we'll talk about sort of the strategies that they're employing in that. And then again, talking about your goals, evaluation, and the nitty-gritty of really managing a social media program. So to get started, we want you guys to chat in your responses to these two statements. So when I think about social media, I feel, and I'm currently using social media in my work too. So go ahead and chat in, and we will let other folks know how others are feeling. All right, so someone said, like an old lady out of date, I have a hard time engaging people. Okay. Ancient. So I think, we're hoping that we can give you some tools where you can maybe feel a little more comfortable with these platforms. Excited, connective, apprehensive, comfortable and engaging. These are all what folks are saying. Not very personal, that I could learn so much more. Overwhelmed by all the options. That I just figured out Facebook and it's already out of date. That much of the interaction is inappropriate, comfortable and engaging, time-consuming, connected to friends. Great. All right. Well, we hope by the end that you'll be a little more comfortable and have some ideas about what platforms might work best for you. So in the tip sheet that you received, a framework was presented called the POST framework. And I think this is a nice framework to think about when we're thinking about our social media work. So it starts with the notion of people. Who do I want to engage? Where can I engage them? So in this case, it might be I want to engage youth, or maybe it's I want to engage parents, or maybe it's I want to engage the community more broadly. It also then you move to identify your objectives. So what do I want to accomplish by using social media? What are my goals? And this will be really, I think when you can identify your objectives, it will help with this notion of feeling overwhelmed. Because as you said, I mean, social media is very big. There's a lot of different platforms you can use. You can be using it 24/7. But really crystallizing, okay, what do I hope to accomplish? And then how can I get there? I think might make it a little bit more manageable. So that's the strategy, sort of based on the people and objectives that I have, what is my plan, and what resources do I have available? And then technologies, which we'll be, talking about actually at the beginning, is what are the best tools to use based on the people, my objectives, and my strategy. I think the most important thing that we want you to take away from this is to remember that social media is another way to communicate with your target audience. So it's simply another communication tool. I think what's unusual about this is usually, before social media or even online media existed, in order to access our target groups by communication, we either had to do it in person or go through a gatekeeper, like a newspaper or a TV station. And now we're able to access large numbers of our target group directly. And so it gives us a lot of opportunity, but it's not without work. All right, so thinking about how can social media help your work? So as many of you have already mentioned, you can engage youth who are currently in your program, and maybe that's a way to keep them, excited about the opportunities coming up, remind them of sessions, try to build more of both an in-person and online community with those who are currently in your program. You can increase awareness of your program among other youth in your community and help recruit them into your program, so it can be almost like a branding and marketing tool. And then you can build broader community support for your program. So this might be if you're thinking about reaching out to some of the older, beyond just youth, and really getting other folks in your community engaged. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jessica, who really is the social media maven at our office, and she's going to talk you through the platforms.
All right, so let's get started by talking about what social media is exactly. It's kind of a vague term that people throw around quite a bit, but in fact, social media is the interactive element of your communication, and it refers to any media that allows for conversation and sharing rather than quote-unquote broadcast communication. In other words, traditional media would be when you watch the news. It's one way. Whereas social media, like Facebook or Twitter, shares information and allows for the audience to communicate with you, the information sharer. As you guys are well aware, there are lots and lots and lots of different social media channels out there, and not all of them are right for every audience. And for the sake of time, we're going to limit ourselves to 5 of the most popular ones out there: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and Tumblr. Thinking back to the POST framework, we will be sharing different information about these tools so that you can decide which ones might be useful to you based on who you're trying to engage and reach, what your objectives are for social media, and the strategy you think will work best for you based on your time, your audience, the way that you can participate. You received a reference document we've referred to a few different times that links to all of the info that we're including in this. Like Katy said repeatedly, this stuff changes almost on a minute-by-minute basis. So if there's any questions that you have about statistics, you'll see, refer back to the resources list that you've received for links to the most up-to-date data. So who is using social media? Within the last 10 years, the social media world has really exploded. And frankly, if you went back in time, even as recently as 2006, and said the word Twitter, I can assure you that most people would not have any idea what that meant beyond birds chirping. Social media and the 5 platforms that we'll talk about today is a relatively new invention, but that doesn't mean people are slow adopters. In fact, nearly all people who are online regularly use at least one social media platform. That in and of itself is a huge win for marketers. If you realize that the people who are online, which is a vast majority of people in this country, that group of people is also using social media at an extremely high rate, you've got a really targeted audience that you can reach. So if you're getting pushback from your organization about starting a social media program, it might be worth presenting a few of these statistics just to show how valid it is to dip your toe into this water. Nearly everyone is on some type of social media, and it's an excellent way to meet your audience where they are. And remember, people access social media on all kinds of different devices, which means that your audience is no longer tethered to their PC. They can see your tweets on the bus, on their phone, and your Facebook posts in a coffee shop on their tablet. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week all-access pass to the people you want to reach. So specifically, who is using social media? 93% of online 12 to 17-year-olds, 93% of 12 to 17-year-olds are online, and 81% of them use social networking sites. 83% of 18 to 29-year-olds use social networking sites, and 77% of 30 to 49-year-olds. 52% of 50 to 64, and 32% of those 65 years and older. To be clear, these numbers have risen every year since we started tracking them, and there's no doubt in my mind that it's only going to continue going up. So this is not a lost cause. This is definitely something that's worth focusing on. All right, we're going to do our second check-in now. If you could chat in answers to the following questions, that would be great. I think teens are using social media too, and I think adults are using social media too. We'll give people a second to chat in, and then we'll read a few of your answers.
So teens are using them to keep up with friends, find out what their friends are doing, engage in inappropriate behaviors, connect with friends, create and maintain friendships. Adults might be using this to check up on their teens. Let's see, both are communicating with others. Kids are connected. Kids are doing it to connect, and adults to stay informed, to spy on each other. It's interesting, to send pictures to each other. Teens to connect with peers and get up-to-date information, friends and families. So a lot of it is about communicating, connecting, for adults, reconnecting with old friends, maybe using it for business, and it's another way to stay connected both professionally and personally.
This is actually really interesting. There are a lot of people who are talking about hooking up and doing inappropriate things. So that's actually a nice segue into talking about privacy. We want to be clear about mentioning privacy because it's a concern for a lot of people, and I think a lot of organizations and nonprofits are afraid to do social media because they're afraid of legal issues with working with underage young people. Social media is designed to be an open forum, so it's important that you're conscious of how you engage and work with teens using social media. For example, as we'll discuss later, inviting teens to create content for social media is an excellent way to add authenticity and interest to your channels, but you have to be careful to curate the topics that you suggest teens use. Asking for a blog post on what makes a good partner is very different than asking for a blog post on how you lost your virginity. It's pretty obvious that one of those things is appropriate to ask a 15-year-old to talk about, and one of them is not appropriate. If you work with a core group of youth, privacy and sensitive info may be a great topic for a discussion or a training for them, just to make sure that they're fully aware of what is, and more importantly, what is not expected of them as content creators. As we all know, teens will share any and everything, and they are neither shy nor circumspect. So the goal of you as the administrator and the adult in the room is to never exploit the teens you're trying to reach, which of course we know you would never do, but it's just something to keep in mind and to be very conscious of. Anyone? So let's talk about the big whale in the social media ocean, Facebook. We'll spend the next few minutes reviewing all of the tools and the most popular ones, but Facebook is the big one. Everyone knows about Facebook. It really needs no introduction. But just by way of that, it's a social networking service that helps connect people with people, aka friends, in your hometown or across the world. It's set up so that you can post text updates, videos, images, links, and a bunch of other stuff on your profile, and read posts from your friends on your wall. Facebook has more than 1 billion active users. 4.7 billion items are shared daily. 350 million photos are uploaded daily. This one kind of blows me away, and I am positive that since we made this presentation it's changed. The average teen user has 300 friends. The average Facebook user spends 20 minutes on Facebook per visit. If you know anything about using websites or website time on site, 20 minutes per visit is ridiculous, and it's really rare. Facebook is great for communication, both public and private, community building, marketing, engagement. It's a really excellent tool if you have the time to use it. And if you have the time for only one resource, this is a really good one to start. It's an excellent tool for communicating. One example of this is the Mobile County Department of Health. They have a really active Facebook presence where they regularly advertise activities and events for their teen group. It's an extension of the work that they're already doing with their teens, but it allows them to create a whole nother presence in the community that they couldn't do otherwise. Most of their posts are image-based, which is really great. Images are really strong to use in social media, but they also share relevant articles, encouraging quotes, videos. In other words, they have a lot of variety, but their messaging is very targeted towards their group, which is teens. So just a little bit more about Facebook. 58% of Facebook users are female and 42% of male. In general, social media is usually more female than male. 71% of adults use Facebook, 90% of young people 12 to 17 use Facebook, and 74% of users are accessing Facebook from a mobile device. So that just sort of calls back to the notion that if you're posting content on Facebook, people are reading it everywhere. They're not just sitting at a desktop computer. They're looking at it all the time. So the little brother, Twitter. Twitter is an online social networking and microblogging service that enables users to send and read tweets. Those are text-based messages, and they are limited to 140 characters. Users can also add images and now video to their tweets, and they can share links to other resources or events. Twitter is one of those places where images are also a really, really big win, a lot of more engagement with tweets that include images. Twitter has 646 million accounts with more than 115 million active users, and there are actually 9,100 tweets per second, which is pretty unbelievable. The average teen user has 79 followers, and this is a really great channel for quick info, keeping engagement up, and delivering targeted messaging. Twitter is excellent for a steady stream of short and diverse content and targeted messaging. In other words, messages aimed at a specific audience. And a really good example of this is the South Carolina campaign's Teen Presence, Not Right Now SC. This channel is meant only for teens and shares info on finding health centers, preventing teen pregnancy, having a healthy relationship, and they also mix in some pop culture nuggets that are focused on a younger audience. Another really cool use of Twitter is by using a targeted hashtag. A hashtag is sort of a subject word that you might include in a tweet that sums up what the tweet is about. Using a targeted hashtag is great for events, in particular conferences. It allows conference attendees to share feedback and reaction to the material that's being shared, and it gives people who aren't able to attend the conference an opportunity to learn what's going on. In other words, it adds another layer of communication and engagement to an event that isn't otherwise possible, and it gives an opportunity for more participation, involvement, and engagement from attendees. One example of this is the FISBE annual conference last year. Participants were encouraged to tag all of their tweets with the same hashtag. And at this year's HHS Teen Pregnancy Prevention Grantee Conference, they will be doing the same thing. So keep your eyes out for that hashtag, and then you can follow along and get a whole nother layer of involvement with the conference. 53% of Twitter users are female and 47% are male. 18% of adults use Twitter, 26% of teens use Twitter, 22% of African Americans use Twitter. This teen number is growing pretty rapidly. I would say 2 to 3 years ago, it was maybe 5 or 10%. So the fact that it's more than doubled in that time is a real indicator that teens are moving to this channel in number. 40% of Twitter users are just listening. So listening is a term in the social media world that basically means that you're a passive user. You have an account on this channel, but you're not actively adding content. In other words, you're just reading other people's tweets and sort of seeing what's going on in the community. Listening is probably the most common on Twitter itself, and it's a useful piece of the puzzle for 2 reasons. First, it can get you really familiar with the language and the best practices of Twitter. If you don't tweet, or if you're afraid to get on Twitter, sign yourself up for a username and just start following people and listen to what's going on around you. It'll help you answer questions like how people interact with each other, what makes a good or a bad tweet in your opinion. It'll give you a sense of what kind of accounts you like or don't like. It'll show you whether you can tweet too often or not enough. It'll give you a sense of what kind of tone is really good or what kind of tone is off. It generally will just help you get a really good sense of how Twitter works and how you can apply what you like to your own channel. Listening also gives you the lay of the land. It shows you who from your community is active and who isn't, and how you can fit into the space that already exists. So if you're not quite ready to jump in, it's a great way to learn Twitter and develop a perspective and a plan for how to participate. So moving right along to Instagram. Instagram is an image and video-based social media channel that allows users to snap a photo or shoot a short video with their mobile phone, and then use a filter if they so choose to transform the image and post it. They can caption, hashtag, and share their creations via their account. Generally, the most common way of using Instagram is through an app on your phone, either your iPhone or your Android, but there is also a web component. It's just far more bare bones than the app is. Instagram has 150 million active users and 75 million daily users. 55 million photos are shared daily, and it's great for sharing your activities and events, creating a visual scrapbook of your work, and building interest in your cause. All of these things that may interest your audience because they're visual. Social media really is a visual medium, and engagement is much higher when images or videos are used. So Instagram is a really interesting community to be a part of. Really good example of a good Instagram account is I Matter Philly, which is the Pennsylvania-based Family Planning Council's teen outreach arm. They host a robust Instagram account that features the teens who they work with, their prom photos, empowering artwork, seasonally appropriate messages and images, and a variety of other on-message items. The content often features their youth advisory board members, but is also just as often the funny, fun, and relevant items that they find all across the web. The whole effect is a well-curated, on-message, interesting account that appeals to the audience, which is teens, and helps inform them as well. 68% of Instagram users are female and 32% are male, so you see here it really skews female versus male. 11% of teens use Instagram, but believe me, this number is growing rapidly. Instagram is kind of like the Twitter of 2 years ago. 37% of 18 to 29-year-olds use Instagram, and 17% of adults age 30 and older. It's also really interesting to note that Instagram has a rapidly growing minority base, which Twitter does as well. Pinterest. Pinterest is a pinboard-style photo-sharing website that allows users to create and manage theme-based image collections like events, interests, or hobbies. Pinterest has 70 million users, and there are approximately 5 million daily pins. Users spend an average of 14 minutes on the site per visit, which is, again, a really high number. And it's a great way that you could do contests or build your community very creatively. One really good example, not to brag, I don't run this Pinterest board, but the national campaign's 20-something brand Bedsider uses Pinterest in a variety of ways. They post a lot of really cool pictures of Bedsider products, but also unique images of different methods of birth control, pictures of really delicious desserts, beautiful bedrooms. They've kind of tried to turn it into a lifestyle blog. They've also run some really interesting contests, including the most recent, which was called What's in Your Bedside Drawer. The whole goal of the contest was to get more followers, and contestants were asked to create a pin board of items that they might find in their bedside drawer and then post that board onto Bedsider's Facebook page. If they did that, they were entered to win a prize. This actually created a relationship between the Bedsider Pinterest page and the Bedsider Facebook page and improved activity on both. Bedsider's Pinterest page gained nearly 200 new followers, and their Facebook page gained over 400 likes. So that's a really simple way to get some engagement and to add some people is to run a contest like that. This is where the strongest gender gap is. Pinterest is primarily female, 80% to 20%, and it's also primarily 18 to 29-year-old women. 24% of Pinterest users are over 29, between 30 and 49. They're generally more affluent, educated, and from suburban populations. And 35% of Pinterest users are mobile only. In other words, they don't even go on their computer for Pinterest. They strictly use their tablet or their cell phone. Tumblr is a microblogging platform and a social networking website that allows users to post images, videos, quotes, links, and text-based content in a short-form blogging platform. They can follow other blogs, or they can make their blog private if they so choose. Tumblr has 102 million blogs, and there are 89 million posts daily. This is another one with a very high engagement rate of 22 minutes on site per visit. This is a really good place, or a really good medium for sharing diverse content, allowing a lot of voices to speak in one place. For example, if you have a youth team and you want to have a lot of input from them. It's also really good if you want a supplementary website. If your corporate website is a little too buttoned up and you need a place for more teen-friendly content, for example, Tumblr is a really good way to do that. Bedsider is another great example of a well-curated Tumblr blog, and it supplements the actual bedsider.org website. Because the organization's primary website is so structured, the Bedsider team uses Tumblr as a relaxed blog-like venue to post short thoughts, pictures, videos, etc. In general, it's stuff that doesn't really fit very well on the main Bedsider page, but it's still super valuable to our audience. They can collect a huge variety of relevant content that may otherwise go unposted, which is another way that you can integrate teens into your work. Consider asking them to submit writing, photos, quotes, other things that you can put on Tumblr that wouldn't really fit on your primary website. Lets a number of different voices shine through, and it's a more relaxed environment. 53% of Tumblr users are female and 47% are male. 46% of Tumblr users are 16 to 24 years old. So this is a really great place to find teens, older teens. 67% of Tumblr users are under 35. This is a really young and extremely engaged group of people, so it's a really great medium to get teens involved in. All right, so that was a ton of information. We just went through 5 of the most popular platforms in quite a bit of detail and very quickly. So we're going to talk more in depth about these platforms and how you can use them, but we wanted to pause for a second and see if there are any questions. So feel free to chat in any questions you have so far about the channels that we've discussed. We'll just pause for a second.
So one of the questions is there somewhere to find the examples that Jessica had mentioned? And yes, we can remind you again, those examples were the Not Right Now campaign from the South Carolina Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, I Matter Philly from the Family Planning Council of Philadelphia, and then the Mobile County Health Department, and their campaign is called Think Teen. So if you Google any of those, they should pop up, but we can also talk to Marissa about putting them on the communities of practice so you can check back.
We also got a question, what is the best way to run a contest? We've tried a few times, but we can't get more likes on our Facebook page. Contests are really tricky. There are a number of variables to having a successful contest. It depends on the prize you're offering, frankly. If it's a really hot item, for example, when the first iPad came out, everyone wanted to get their hands on that, and so that as a prize was a huge, huge motivator. If you're offering kind of a less attractive prize, something not quite as sexy, that could be a barrier for people entering. It really does also depend on what kind of contest you're running. If it's something fun, and this is kind of why Pinterest is a good venue for contests, people are already so engaged in posting and doing stuff that it's very easy for them to collect pins on a pin board and then take that to Facebook. So because Bedsider is reaching out to 18 to 29-year-olds, and that is Pinterest's primary target, it was really easy to integrate a contest in there and get engagement on both Pinterest and Facebook. But there are a number of different variables that can kind of make contests either really, really succeed or not be as great. So I would welcome whomever asked that question. If you want to email me after the webinar is over, I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about this.
And another idea is to talk to the youth that you're working with and find out sort of what prizes would they be interested in and what kind of contests do they participate in.
That's a good suggestion for any of this. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but always ask the audience that you're trying to reach, assuming that you can get a hold of them, what they want.
And an idea for prizes is that's a great way to involve the business community, that
right.
They can donate any of their prizes. So the next one, we are a new organization. Which social media do you suggest we use to get our name and programming out there? I think, because Facebook just has the biggest reach, that would be our recommendation for a place to start. And again, as we're going to get into, as we get in later to the webinar, we're going to talk about, it's really critical to identify who is your audience. And you might have a couple different audiences. So you'll notice that Jessica's been talking about a couple different platforms that we have. We have a corporate website.
We have a lot. We have a corporate website.
Which talks to like professionals. We have a teen website, which is really where we focus our outreach to youth ages about 12 to 17. And really sort of our sweet spot is like the 13, 14, 15-year-olds. And then we have a young adult site that's for 18 to 29. So it's really hard to talk to one audience or to many audiences through one platform. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. And then I think there's another question is there an organization that assists nonprofits with startup costs in order to help integrate social media into their work? That I am not sure of. That's a great question, but let us do some digging and we can see if we can get you an answer.
Okay, any other questions? We'll read them out if we get any more in the meantime. So, okay, so we've got a lot of background, so let's get started. We're going to spend some time thinking about how you can use these social media channels in your work with teams. So remember to chat in any questions you have as we go along. Okay, so we're going to do one more quick check-in. I want to use social media for my program because I will consider this social media work successful if. So if you could chat in your answers to those two questions, we'll just read a few of them aloud as we go.
By the way, as we're waiting, I just want to apologize if I'm not being very articulate. I had some dental work done this morning unexpectedly, so I might be lisping here a bit. All right, so people have started to chat in a little bit. I want to use social media for my program because I want to reach more participants. Great. I'm I want to make the program more interesting to teens. I want to, it will help me get information and events to my participants. I want to spread awareness and provide education to a larger group. It could be an effective way to reach my program participants. We want to use it to promote our program. And we'll consider this successful if we get more referrals and word-of-mouth referrals. Great. If my youth stay engaged and respond, so we'll consider it successful if we boost recruitment and increase awareness. We get more follow-ups, and also I think social media can be used as a way to provide ongoing educational tools for the teens. Successful when people invite others to join my page. It will help, let's see, teens become more aware of the program and the services. It will be successful if we get more participants and if we have more participants completing the cycle, so thinking about it as a way to keep folks engaged over maybe a long period of time. And we want to make sure, we want to use social media for retention and keep them informed about events and meetings. Great.
These are all really, really great reasons to start a program. Generally, if I'm talking to people about social media, I like to make sure that they've asked themselves a few questions before they begin. People often say that social media is free, and so why not go crazy and just start every single channel you possibly can? But I think we all realize that, in fact, social media is not free. There may not be a cost to turn on a Facebook page, but your time isn't free, and that means that neither are any of these channels that you start. So before you actually start any of these programs, it's really important to know why you're starting, who is going to run the show, whether you're committed to keeping this channel going. If you can't answer these questions, it might be worth shelving a program until you have a better idea of what you want. Just doing it because everyone else is not a good reason to do social media, and luckily nobody said that. So your organization will need to decide whether or not using social media is worth doing, and if so, whether there's a full-time staff person to manage it. If you've got someone who already has a full-time job and then you add a social media program onto that, that will take more time. It's important to keep in mind that this needs to be budgeted for during a regular workday. So remember the POST framework when you're thinking about starting a channel. What's your objective? What do you want to accomplish? These are questions that we asked in the check-in, and they're helpful to identify your objective. So make sure you think about things like this with your team. In the handout, you'll notice the last item on this list is, do you need a social media policy? This is a really important question to think about, particularly when you're working with young people. And even more particularly, if you are inviting your young people or multiple people on your staff to submit content, especially to a site like Twitter or Facebook. In the handout you received, you'll find a number of links with information on creating a social media policy. Many organizations consider having one a best practice, and these links will help you determine whether you need one, and they'll even do you one better by helping you craft a policy using some boilerplate language. It can be really tough to come up with a good policy, and so you can sort of borrow what's already out there to create one for your organization. So let's say you do know that you want to start a social media program. So the next step is figuring out who you're trying to reach with that program, because as we've seen in the previous slides, different channels appeal to different young people or different audiences. So think about who you're trying to reach. Who is your target? Not all social media reaches all people, so identifying who you're trying to reach is key. Thinking back to the POST framework, it's important to define the people you want to reach. We know that pretty much everyone is on Facebook. So if you have time for nothing but one channel, Facebook's probably a really good one to start with. Teens are really active on Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. Adult women, and in particular moms, are very active on Pinterest. And minority communities are the fastest growing group of social media users and use Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. So think about those things when you're deciding what kind of channel you want to create. So based on what we learned earlier with respect to who uses platforms, we have developed this map that you see in front of you. You'll want to start with just one social media channel at first so that you really know how to do it, how to craft your messaging, how to devote the amount of time to it that you need to, and so that you're comfortable with what you're doing. So based on what we learned so far, we know that teens most commonly use 4 of the 5 social media channels that we've discussed. So if you're working with teens or teens are your target, it makes the most sense to start your social media program using one of these 4 channels. Again, if you're not really sure, the best bet is always Facebook. That one will hit the most number of people, but any of these four are commonly used by teens. Katy mentioned this earlier too, that if you work with teens directly, there's no reason you shouldn't ask them how they want to receive their information. If all of the teens in your group are on Instagram and none of them use Tumblr, why would you waste your time with Tumblr? And the same goes with Facebook. I can sit here and tell you to devote all your time to Facebook, but if none of your kids use it or use it very rarely, whereas they use Twitter constantly, don't waste your time with Facebook. Start a Twitter channel. This is really a first step to reaching your audience, and we thought it would be a helpful exercise to sort of map out the way young people and adults are using social media.
There's also an important consideration when deciding which social media to use. So for example, Facebook, you have a little more control on if you want to create a closed page. So for example, if you're talking about programs or participants who are already in a program, you could create a closed page just for that group. And I know many of you mentioned you want to improve retention. That might be a better way, whereas Twitter is always an open platform. So Facebook, you have to, for Twitter, anyone can see what you're posting.
Unless you make your channel private, which is generally not something you want to do on Twitter. Okay, so choosing a strategy. We've now identified a target audience, a goal, and objectives for using social media, and potentially the platform that we're going to use. So next up is developing a strategy for how to use this technology to reach our objectives. And once again, feel free to chat in any questions that you have so far, and we'll do our best to kind of pause and answer them. So before you get going, choose wisely. If your resources are limited, be selective. And we've talked quite a bit about this. A better way of putting it is doing one channel very well is better than doing many channels poorly. And as an example from my own life, Instagram, as we've made clear, is very image heavy and very teen heavy. And both of those things are really great for, let's say, a teen channel like Stay Teen, which is the National Campaign's teen brand. You would think it would be a no-brainer for us to have an Instagram feed, but in fact, until last week, we did not. And the reason for that is because we did an audit of all of the resources we had in our office in terms of who could manage this channel, and we did an audit of the content we thought we could post on the channel, and we came to the conclusion that we just could not make the channel worth people's while. It wasn't worth starting this channel yet because we didn't have the resources to maintain it and make it good. As of last week, we've actually changed our minds on that, and we have a channel that we just started. So it's important to know that, number one, you shouldn't do something just because it's out there, and number two, you can always change your mind and start something later. Everyone's doing it is a really bad reason to start a particular social media channel. Just because an organization similar to yours has a Pinterest page does not mean that you also should have one. It really is about whether you can maintain the content. And that speaks to the next point. You have to feed the beast. We've said before that lots of people argue that social media is a free marketing tool, but your time is not free. Time is money, and social media takes time. And now that your audience can access social media from anywhere, they are consuming your content all the time. It's important that you're providing content not constantly, but frequently. So if you can't maintain the channels that you've started, it's better not to start them at all. Finally, the best way to really dip your toe in the water and get a sense of what's out there is to do what we talked about earlier, which is listening. Follow who your targets are following and find out what's out there in the world that you want to be in. See what other people are saying and doing, and then prepare yourself for how you can handle this. So let's talk about some specific examples in the world. We want to talk about some of the challenges that are out there with starting a social media program and how you can use certain strategies to meet those challenges. The overall goal of most national or state level social media channels is to raise awareness of the organization or the brand and ensure that the organization is staying relevant and engages their audience. So we're going to talk about some ways that you can do that through your different channels. So one strategy that's really simple is to make national events local or to localize national things. For example, you'll see in this sample tweet here that the Guttmacher released some national level data that had state-specific components about it. And so the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Campaign of North Carolina tweeted about the state statistics. So they talked about North Carolina statistics, which was relevant to their audience, and then linked to the national report. You'll notice that they also thanked Guttmacher, which is a best practice. When you're sharing someone else's content, it's important to give them credit. It also helps build the relationship between yourself and the organization with whom you're sharing content. So I don't know if anybody remembers this incident. At the 2013 Super Bowl, there was actually a blackout in the middle of the game. What ended up happening was that Oreo, who did not buy any Super Bowl marketing time or advertising time, which, as you know, is an extremely expensive thing to do, realized that they had an opportunity. They quickly made the graphic that you see before us and tweeted it out to all of their followers, and it went viral, basically. People were retweeting it all night long, and although they had purchased no airtime during the normal commercials, which, as we all know, is the best part of the Super Bowl, they were actually one of the most talked about ads the following Monday among all the other marketing that was out there. So a strategy is to capitalize on opportunities. You're not always going to have a golden egg like this fall into your lap, but consider what's going on in the world around you and use those opportunities to heighten your social media presence. So this is a really old example. You'll note the date is 2011, but it's one of my favorites because if you start a social media channel or program, you will almost certainly deal with some sort of mistakes. Mistakes happen, and because this is social media, they are very, very public very quickly. What happened here was that a person who managed the Red Cross's social media channel, which has a lot of followers, accidentally tweeted something out through the corporate page that they meant to tweet out from their private Twitter account. Although this isn't common, it really does happen, especially for social media managers who run multiple channels and try to do their own tweeting during the day. In this case, as you can see, the offending tweet was about getting drunk, which is clearly not something Red Cross wanted attached to their brand. Luckily, the Red Cross actually responded pretty quickly to the tweet, and they managed to do it in a way that highlighted both their sense of humor and their mission. They deleted the original tweet, owned up to the mistake, and followed it up with an explanatory blog post, but ultimately treated the entire situation as relatively low-key. And Dogfish Head, who is the brewer that was mentioned in the original tweet about beer, actually sent out their own tweet encouraging people to donate to the Red Cross. And the issue actually got national attention and raised donations for the Red Cross during the week of the issue. The Red Cross's social media director responded about the whole incident when she was asked about it and said, "We're an organization that deals with life-changing disasters, and this wasn't one of them." Now, obviously, not all social media gaffes turn out so well or can be as easily dealt with, but it's an important lesson to stay calm, potentially handle things with humor, and deal with things at the level of severity that they need to be dealt with. So a word about tone. Tone is really important, and as you can see in front of you, there are 3 examples of tweets, one from each of the channels that the national campaign runs. You'll note how incredibly different all 3 of them are because each channel deals with 3 very distinct groups of people. So it's really important that you identify and use the appropriate tone for your audience. Teens really do not want to feel talked down to or condescended to. They want to know that what they're doing and feeling and thinking is normal. And so it's important to approach your content in such a way that you're not violating these rules. For example, we would never tweet CDC data at our teen group, and we would never tweet pictures of Justin Bieber at our corporate group. Tone is really important depending on the audience you're trying to reach because it builds trust and it shows that you know who your audience is and who you're trying to reach.
It is another reason why it's hard to reach multiple audiences through one channel.
Okay, this is an example in front of you of 2 different Pinterest accounts, and this is sort of similar to the tone conversation. You need to know your audience so that you can share content that will be more likely to engage them. A lot of people have mentioned that they want engagement with their group, their teens. So if you decide to start any channel, what you're sharing on there should be something that they want to share. When they're sharing it, all of their friends are seeing it, which is going to make it more likely that their friends are then getting involved in your organization. So this doesn't happen naturally. This can take a lot of testing and a lot of experimenting, and it's okay to course correct to find the right things for your audience. Each group that we work with is unique, so it depends on what they want at any given day. So a little bit of testing is always helpful. The slides here, as you can see, the top one is from the Smithsonian, the bottom one is from Nordstrom. Obviously, the Smithsonian isn't posting pictures of sunglasses and shoes. They're posting pictures of baby animals because that's what they do. So it's important to keep in mind that you should be posting stuff that's relevant to your audience. We've talked a ton about this. Images are very key to a popular social media channel. Photos on Facebook generate 53% more likes than the average non-image post, and tweets with pictures were retweeted 35% more than text-only tweets. It's really important to use engaging stuff, and video is generally more engaging than pictures. Another strategy is to borrow what others are doing. These are examples from the campaign's Twitter feed, and you'll see that a lot of this stuff comes from other people. We're retweeting other people's things or sharing things from other organizations. And the point here is that you shouldn't feel like you need to reinvent the wheel. Use what's already out there and make your workload a little bit lighter. Part of this also is being really strategic about who you're following, because if you're following the wrong people, they're going to be producing content that will be useful to your audience. So a word about how often you tweet and what you tweet or send out in your social media channels. It's good to be repetitive, but be careful about how repetitive you are. The example in front of you is essentially the same tweet repeated 4 times within a 24-hour period. Because people are now consuming content all the time, there's a good chance that you're going to have somebody scrolling through your Twitter feed and seeing all of your tweets bunched up together. So if the same tweet is showing up multiple times in your stream, it's going to look bad, like you don't have a lot to say, or like you think this one thing is the most important thing that you can possibly say. The amount of repetition is important, so it's okay to repeat something once or twice, particularly if you do it over a week or two, but multiple times in the same day is not a great idea. Another strategy is to cross-post everything that you're doing. So if you post something on your website, a blog post, for example, that should also be going on your Facebook channel or your Twitter channel or whatever other channels that you have. If you're using multiple channels, this lends consistency to your brand and it lessens the workload for you. All right. So we've talked about the most popular platforms and who's on them. We've talked about how to figure out which of them, if any, and that's important, if any, are right for you. And we've just showed you some real-world examples of how different brands are using their channels to get the word out. So now it's your turn. We're now going to talk about exactly what you can do to use social media in your work. And again, chat in any questions if you have them. So before we get started, we're going to do a check-in. The idea of dealing with negative, controversial, or mean-spirited social media makes me feel blank. All right, we're getting some feedback already. Nervous. People said nervous, overwhelmed, nervous and uncomfortable, challenged, leery, even more determined to use it in a positive way, opportunistic. It comes with the territory, so it's something that can be managed. Upset, concerned, living in a conservative community. I don't want people to associate it with me as a person. Intrigued. Okay, these are all really, really interesting, and they're pretty common responses to the idea of controversy and dealing with negative social media. We're going to get to that a little bit later in this section about how you can deal with controversy and when or if you should deal with mean-spirited tweets, because you don't have to answer every single tweet you see. So, a few things before we get started. Content is really the king of any social media channel. When you're thinking about your content, you want to serve dinner and dessert. It's important to share fun, irrelevant, and interesting stuff along with data, resources, and serious stuff. Mixing humor and irrelevant content is really good for keeping your audience engaged. And it doesn't have to be a one-to-one ratio. It doesn't have to be a joke tweet and then a serious one. You have to do a little bit of testing to find a good balanced stream for your audience. Listen and speak. This goes back to the 40% of Twitter users not actually tweeting at all. It's reasonable to think that many social media users aren't doing anything, But it's also reasonable to think that many of them, although not active, are just listening to what's going on. So feel free to gain knowledge from what you hear out there. Don't feel like you have to jump right in by talking. You can listen for a while and learn what's going on around you. Once again, with tone. Tone is really important. Do not expect to have a thriving social media channel for teens if your content and tone is geared toward adults. As Katy has said a couple times now, it's really, really difficult to have one successful channel that reaches all people because different age groups are so incredibly different in what they're interested in. It's just very difficult to do. So it's very important to adapt your tone to your audience's expectations, or you might lose them. So one of the ways that we manage our social media channels, because as I said, I run 2 of them, and that can be a lot of content going out the door, is by using an editorial calendar. One way that I do this is extremely simple, is just grabbing a regular calendar from a Word document and starting by filling in holidays and events throughout the year. So noting Valentine's Day, noting when Let's Talk Month is, noting when the National Day to Prevent Teen Pregnancy happens. And then as you're scrolling through your calendar, you know what's coming up and what you can put what kind of content you should be putting out. Next, fill in the gaps with original or repurposed content. If you have teens who are writing blogs for you or submitting pictures for Instagram, fill in some gaps around those holidays and events with that content. Finally, add variety by sharing content created by others in your field. This is where following good people comes in. Other people will be constantly posting content that's useful to you. So if you're following them, you can also retweet and share that stuff as well. And if at all possible, plan your posts and use scheduling tools to set them up. Most social media channels have the ability to schedule future posts so that you can even be posting on the weekend without actually doing any work. Now, getting back to that controversy. It is almost certain that at some point in your social media career, controversy will knock on your door, and how you handle the situation says a lot about your brand. Just recall again the example of the Red Cross. They could have completely freaked out and made a big deal out of the situation, but instead they handled it with humor and actually ended up getting a bump in donations as a result. If you're faced with a crisis, consider the following advice. Be calm. If possible, use humor. Get the details. It's important to know exactly what you're getting into here. Don't go off without all of the information. If you have partners in the field who have your back, get them involved if it gets to that level and get them to be a champion for you. And it's really important to know that you do not need to respond to every single thing on social media, either the good or the bad. It's definitely good to interact with your followers. That's why you have them. But every single negative post that you see does not need to be something that you respond to. There's an art to deciding what to reply to, and not everything rises to that level. What? Oh, Katy was just saying, talking about taking down negative stuff. That is a subtle thing, because once it's out there, and if you take it down, you're acknowledging that it's there. We absolutely take down anything on our teen channel that has curse words, that is racially insensitive, that is just really crosses the line for the tone that we're trying to achieve with our brand. A lot of this stuff is really obvious. You know, if you see a lot of F-bombs on your channel, that shouldn't be there, especially if it's a channel for teens. Some of it's a little more on the edge, you know, people saying they don't like our mission. And that's something that I generally leave up because you're entitled to your opinion and it doesn't hurt our brand to have people disagreeing with it. So what you see in front of you is actually a process that the YMC of Metro Chicago developed to help staff think through the controversy or when they see inappropriate posts or posts that were negative. You might not have the luxury of different departments like they do. In fact, I'm the one who makes the decisions about whether I take down stuff on our social media channel. And for me, it's a gut check generally. This is just an example of how you might create a flow chart that will help walk you through when and when not to respond to things. So you've got your channel, you've got some followers, you're posting, things are happening, things are moving along. So how do you know if it's working? The only real way to know if what you're doing is successful is by setting goals. Consider what you want to achieve. Are you trying to get more followers? Are you trying to get involvement with the community? whatever you're doing should be what your goals are set around. So take your objectives and break them down into measurable goals and questions that you can answer with the evaluation tools available. And we will talk a little bit more about that later, evaluation. A word of caution, don't feel the need to set a goal of 1,000 new followers per month. That's unreasonable, and you're setting yourself up for failure. 10 may be too small. You'll know quickly how many people are starting to like or follow your stuff, and you should adjust your goals accordingly. It's important to learn from your work and course correct. If what you're posting isn't working, if you're not getting any kind of reaction ever, you might be posting at the wrong time, you might be posting with the wrong tone. It's important to learn from what you're doing and sort of try some different things until you've hit a rhythm and figured out what works for you and your audience. Don't be afraid to throw in the towel. If you realize after several months of doing this that it's just not working, it's okay to shutter your channel. It's not a failure. It's a lesson. In fact, the campaign at one time had a channel for 20-somethings that just was not working, and we ultimately closed it down and regrouped and came back with Bedsider. So there are ways to course correct what you're doing, but ultimately if it's not working and it's wasting your time, it's not worth doing. So a better way of looking at this possibly is, this is a flowchart that we've set up to help you walk through whether or not your channel is working. You want to decide how to measure engagement, and this should be dependent on your overall objectives. Do you want more followers, more comments, more page views for your website, more community support? That depends on you. Once you've figured that out, you can create a plan based on this decision. So this is basically just a few questions to answer, or to ask yourself to see if things are working. And again, don't be afraid to change course, to try different things, or ultimately to throw in the towel if things are not working. So we've talked a little bit very tangentially about evaluation, and I would say the good and the bad of social media now is that there are 1,000 different ways that you can evaluate any one thing that you're working on. Some platforms like Facebook and Twitter have analytics built right into the platform itself, but you can also use additional things like what are listed on the slide that you're seeing now to analyze what you're doing. Most of them are free at the beginning. You'll get a basic level of analytics options, and then if you need to go further than that, if you need to develop certain reports, if you need more in-depth information, they'll start charging you for it. But you can get a baseline using any of these, probably with no money. So we encourage you, for the sake of time, we weren't able to go into a lot of depth with any of these, so we encourage you to Google some of them, or even Google something like free Twitter analytics, and see how many things come back to you, and you'll realize that there are so many options available that you don't need a dedicated IT person to help you use any of them. They're very intuitive and easy to use.
And these will help you know if what you're posting is gaining traction. So you can decide, is it the tone, is it the time of day, is it the day of the week? We're going to talk about that in a little bit. They'll give you a little bit more nuance than just you have likes or not. It helps you analyze what kind of content you're putting out and the reaction that you're getting to that kind of content.
And just as a final follow-up note on evaluation, Katy worked on a webinar from a year or two ago that went very in-depth about actual evaluation tools. That's on our website, and I believe there's also a link in your resources document. So you can actually listen to that webinar and get a lot more info on evaluation tools that way. Okay, so the rest of the webinar, we're going to talk a lot about the 5 channels, and if you use them, some best practices, and then some sort of second-tier options that you can use. So if you use Facebook, there are a few must-dos that you want to do. And I just want to preface this whole section by saying these are very general guidelines, and they change pretty frequently. So don't take this necessarily as a rule that you can only post on Thursdays and Fridays for Facebook. But they're sort of guidelines that most people in the field agree on based on some analytical data. Generally with Facebook, you want to post in the early afternoon, and almost all of the channels you want to avoid 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And I'm sure not many of you were planning to post at 1 in the morning, but it's definitely good to mention that that is not a good time. Thursdays and Fridays are really good days for Facebook. And the popular wisdom is that the later in the week it gets, the less people want to be at work or at school, and the more they're goofing off on Facebook. This is a good piece of advice for any channel. Use an attention-grabbing headline and a call to action. If you're looking for engagement on your Facebook posts, ask a question. Ask your audience to do something. If you're just posting something like, oh, 16 and pregnant is really interesting, there's not a whole lot for me to do with that. But if you say something like, did you see 16 and pregnant last night? What did you think of Maddie's decision to move out of her house? That's more likely to get your audience talking. Don't be afraid to limit yourself to the verbal. And as I've said repeatedly, pictures and videos end up with a whole lot more engagement. People enjoy visual stuff more than the verbal. Confrontation will likely happen on Facebook. We regularly get people telling us how much they hate our mission or what we're doing. And sometimes you want to engage with something like that. Sometimes you don't. And it just really depends on how you want your channel to go. The cover photo on your Facebook page is the big image that's stretched across the top of the page. And so you want that to be engaging. That you absolutely want it to be something. Do not leave your cover photo blank. And don't be afraid to change it every now and then. What we've been doing is, on Stay Teen, is changing it depending on the season. So we'll have a different one in the fall or the spring or the summer.
And make sure that it fits the space appropriately.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Make sure that it's something high resolution enough and large enough that it's not stretched and kind of wonky looking. Pictures and videos. Have a link to your Facebook page on your website. If you have a primary website for teens and you have a Facebook page for teens, your website should absolutely have a Facebook icon that takes you to that page. You want people to know that it's there. We just got a question. Can you give an example of what is something you've confronted on your bedsitter page, an example of what you have not responded to on your bedsitter page? I don't manage the bedsitter page, so I'll actually switch it over to Stay Teen. We probably, I would say maybe twice a month, we'll get either a public or a private message from someone, a teen, an adult, it depends, saying that the tagline for Stay Teen, which is, I love my life, I'm not going to mess it up with a pregnancy, is offensive and not okay to say to teen moms, that it shames teen moms. And many of those people are really articulate and have very thoughtful commentary on why that's a horrible tagline. And I will often respond to those people and explain why we chose it and, you know, why we're keeping it, or, you know, that I really understand where they're coming from. Many of those people will curse in their posts, and I delete those people immediately. I don't always respond because if, let's say there was a public, that question was publicly asked a week ago and I responded to it. If it's asked again this week, it's generally not something I want to address again because it's still public. It's still up there and live. So it really is for us a gut check. It's sort of what has been going on the page. Is it worth bringing this issue up again? Is it worth ignoring it? I weigh a lot of those different things to get to the decision that I make. And I'd be more than happy to talk through that in greater detail if you'd like to email offline. We also just got another question, what is a quote-unquote cover? The cover photo on your Facebook page, if you're looking at your Facebook page, it's the big picture at the top of the page. Generally, a lot of people with their private pages will have a picture of their family or a picture of a beautiful beach scene. It's the big picture, the biggest picture on your page at the very top, and it's always there.
And we got another question that said, what is Picuro? And that is one of the evaluation tools that you can use for Pinterest. So again, it's just an analytic tool that you can look at that will help you analyze both. I'm sorry, it's not just for Pinterest, it's for Instagram, Pinterest, and Tumblr. So I'd encourage you to Google it if you want to check out more about that.
Okay, so if you are feeling ready to go a little deeper into Facebook, one of the things, Katy actually mentioned this earlier, is you can create private group pages for the youth in your program. This is something that we do with our youth leadership team. We have a private youth leadership team group where only the YLT kids and the people who manage them can go in and post and see things. That's a good way of creating community with your team group and a way of maintaining privacy. You don't have to worry about other people seeing that stuff. Creating events. For example, if you want to do a 16 and pregnant watch party, that's sort of a virtual event where you're getting people together, quote unquote, to watch a new episode of 16 and pregnant. You can promote your posts. There is a cost attached to this, and it can be as low as $5 depending on the reach that you want to get. This is something that we dabble in that always gives us a higher, not higher engagement necessarily, but we get a lot more views on our posts for a relatively small amount of money. Use your cover as marketing. You can use your cover photo to show pictures of your an event that's coming up, or to say that the National Day is right around the corner. Think about that as open retail space or a billboard for your organization. You can also ask your young people to create content. We do not let our teens post stuff to any of our social media channels. We ask them to create stuff that they send to us. So generally, we're asking them for evergreen content that we can use anytime and that I backfill into my editorial calendar. Twitter, you want to post at least once a day and generally between noon and 6 p.m. Again, late night is not a good time. Weekends are also really great for posting, and that's where I would encourage you to use a tool to schedule your tweets. Please try to avoid posting 14 times in 2 minutes and then not again for the rest of the day. It's really important to space out your tweets. If you want to allow people to retweet your stuff without editing it, try to keep your tweets to less than 125 characters. I realize that's really hard to do, and Twitter's a lot more open now where people can edit things and mark them as modified tweets. So that's not a huge deal, but that's something to think about. Always keep pictures and video in mind. And remember to follow people who are similarly minded to you. It's important to keep those people in your, keep your people around. Keep those people around so that their content can become your content. And have a link to your Twitter page on your website. This will go for any of the channels that you start. If you have a social media channel, you should be publicizing it on your web page. We just got a question about what is evergreen content. Evergreen content means content that isn't dated. In other words, if I have an article about condoms on my website, that's something I could tweet about right now or in a month from now because it's not really going to change in any marked way between now and later. We talked about using targeted hashtags. So you could always do that. For example, for the National Day, we are going to definitely be using a targeted hashtag that will help people follow along for our National Day events and activities. Trending hashtags means that if some big event is going on and everyone starts hashtagging their tweets with a particular tag, you can try and get on that bandwagon if it fits with your message. Be very careful with doing this that you don't accidentally jump into a hashtag channel that's not appropriate. It's just something to consider whenever you're tweeting. You can also send specialized announcements to your followers, like if you have an online store or you have an event coming up that has a registration fee, you can send out discount announcements or maybe prize announcements to your Twitter followers, like the first person to retweet something could get such and such a prize. If you have an event like a poetry slam or a lock-in for your kids, you could live tweet those events so that people know that it's going on. Let's Talk Month is another good one. Talking about the things that are going on in the world around you are always great topics of conversation. And again, ask your youth participants to create content for you. Again, we never let our teens do tweets without gatekeeping them. We always have them send them to me. But again, if it's evergreen content, it doesn't hurt to have those things laying around. According to the data, it appears that Thursdays or Sundays are the best days to post on Instagram. So if you don't have a ton of time and you want to do an Instagram channel, these are good days to post. One weird thing about Instagram, generally a best practice for a hashtag or for a social media hashtag is to use 1 or 2 per post. And the exact opposite is true in Instagram. In fact, using at least 11 hashtags on an Instagram post creates an average of 77 interactions for that post, meaning that an average of 77 people will like that post. This could be because, unlike other channels, many Instagram users follow specific hashtags based on niche interests that they have. So for example, I really love corgis. Maybe I go on Instagram and I only search for corgi hashtags so I can see as many corgi pictures as I possibly can. So when you're posting stuff to Instagram, broaden the scope of what you think might be a good hashtag for your picture, and don't be afraid to post a ton of them. And share others' posts to build community. When you're liking someone else's post, they then see you, and they might start liking you. This is something that goes cross-channel. Following someone else's tweets or retweeting someone else's tweets makes them aware of you and makes them more likely to follow you. I would highly recommend, if you're going to start an Instagram feed and you do have youth participants, to ask them to create the content. If you are running a teen channel, teens are the best people. Teens are the best people on Instagram to create that content. They have an eye for exactly what they want, and they will make really, really good pictures. I can say that with experience now. Also, think about showing off your products. We have National Day materials for the National Day to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, and we've taken pictures of those and put them on our Instagram channel. Take pictures of health centers, events, or staff advisory panel meetings. All of these things show the real side of the work that you're doing, which is very appealing to your audience. You can also diversify your content by including more than just quote-unquote typical teen pregnancy prevention stuff. We've been posting some prom pictures on our Instagram feed because it's prom season in a lot of communities right now, and that's really fun for our teens to see. And again, like-minded content, keep that in mind every time you are using any of your channels. Pinterest, generally people post and pin between 2 and 4 p.m. or on Saturday mornings. 5 to 7 p.m. tends to be a dead zone because the general Pinterest user is commuting home, working out, getting dinner ready, or is otherwise busy, so they're not really on Pinterest at this time. Following other similarly minded users and commenting frequently is a great way of getting people engaged and on your channel. Use engaging taglines to describe your pins, and space out your pins. Now, you never want to do several things right one on top of the other. You could always connect your Pinterest account to auto-post to Facebook and Twitter. Depending on what you've got going on Facebook and Twitter, that might lead to a content logjam, and you don't want to do that. But if you've got a lot of light posting going on, this is a good way to reduce your workload. You can create boards based on your brand. Things like things I did on my on my summer vacation, or what being a teen means to me. This is a nice way to get younger people involved in your Pinterest channel. We talked about developing contests, and we would also say that uploading your own photos and videos from organizational events is a great thing to add to Pinterest. It adds a lot more, and again, it shows sort of the real side of your work. Regarding Tumblr, this is sort of the weird one. This one actually does encourage, data show that people are on Tumblr between 5 p.m. and 1 a.m. So this is one where you actually could post pretty late at night and it would be fine. Weekends, Wednesdays for some reason, or evenings are good. Always share others' posts because, again, when you share something that someone else has done, they see you and are more likely to start following you. Tumblr is all about the visual and the short. So you want lots of pictures, lots of short videos, or lots of short quotes. This is not the place to write a treatise on anything. You want to tag these posts in a very good, relevant way because that's how people will find your content. Also make sure you're spacing out your posts. There is a queue post feature on Tumblr that will allow you to write a lot of content and schedule it over a period of time that will space it out nicely. This is another place that would be great to ask youth to participate in, to send you pictures or inspirational quotes or things from their daily life that you could post in here. This is another place also, we talked about this earlier, to discuss your organization's work in less formal detail. This can be a supplement to your website in a place that is less formal and buttoned up. It's also fun to do series content on Tumblr. In other words, you could consider making one day per month consistently about STDs, or always doing something on Throwback Thursday, or having a Photo Friday, or a Talk It Out Tuesday series. You can also use Google Analytics to track your progress. We did not get into Google Analytics here, but that is a free service. You can, ironically enough, Google it to find out a little bit more. But it's pretty easy and intuitive to use, and it will show you a lot of incredible data on how you're doing. You can also create a custom URL for your Tumblr blog if you are so inclined. Okay, We rushed a little bit through the last part because I wanted to make sure we left a little bit of time for questions. So we have 10 minutes left just about for the remainder of the webinar time. So I would love for any more questions. Feel free to chat those in, and we will do our best to get to all of them right now. But again, my email address, or at least my Twitter handle, yeah, my email address is on the next slide. And I'd be happy to talk to people offline who have more detailed questions than we can cover.
Any questions? So what is our website address? It's for our corporate site, it's www.thenc.org. And for our teen website, it's stayteen.org.
Okay, we got, whoa, okay, a bunch are coming in. On average, how much time should all of this take to manage all of these accounts? If you have one channel, let's say you just decide to do a teen Facebook page, you can probably accomplish that with a limited amount of effort, maybe an hour or two a week at most. If you add more, or if you are trying to really post extremely frequently, it can take up a lot more time. There's no answer to that because it really depends on how much you put into it and how much you want to get out of it. Okay.
So one is, do you set your Facebook security so no one can post until you approve it?
No. People can post on our wall without my approval. And that's how we do get those public messages that I sometimes have to delete. And that's just something that we've decided to do, and it's worked for us. But that's a decision that you'll have to make depending on the rules of your organization.
So about 2 years ago, it was suggested that social media take up about an hour per week. Has that changed?
Again, if you only have one channel, that could work. There is no way in the world that that is still the case if you have more than one channel. I don't think if you had a Facebook and a Twitter that you could spend only an hour a week.
I mean, part of the challenge is that you want your posts to be really relevant and reflective of what's happening in the world sort of that day, that time. So ideally, while it would be great if you could just spend, Monday morning writing all your content for the week and then schedule it to go out, you never know what's going to happen in the news Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So you want to be able to respond to those things that are happening, and especially at a community level, what is happening in your community that could be relevant? What are events that you find out about that you want to highlight? So you'll need to dedicate a little bit of time, at least every day, to make sure that you're staying current, if that makes sense.
And I think to that end, there's a component of social media where a lot of it is, you sit down on Monday morning and schedule out a block of posts. But what Katy is referring to, and she's exactly right, is the other component is listening and paying attention throughout the day and seeing what else is going on out there so you can be part of that conversation.
So another question is, what is a realistic time frame to see results when you begin to use social media?
Well,
great question.
That is a great question, and it really depends on a lot of things. We've been doing social media for a long time with the national campaign and Stay Teen, and we've gotten to a good level of interaction, but that's taken, I want to say, 6 years. So it's definitely not overnight, but it should be a slow, gradual increase all the time. You should always be seeing 1 or 2 people following or liking or joining your channels probably every week. That's a good measure of success.
What do people use for their name on Twitter?
Well, that really depends. A lot of people now, I think a lot of people thought Twitter was a flash in the pan that was never going to happen and never going to stick around. And they maybe picked goofy or weird or cutesy Twitter handles. But I think a lot of people now do use their real name because Twitter is just a legitimate form of communication. It's nothing that sort of people will look askance at if you're going in for a job interview. That being said, if you do use your real name, make sure your Twitter handle is not, or your Twitter feed is something that you're not afraid of people seeing. Otherwise, make sure you lock it down and make it private.
And I think, you know, Jessica mentioned at the beginning that your organization might have a social media policy. It's very likely that whoever will be managing social media for your organization also is very involved in social media in their own personal lives. And so it can be complicated to have both a personal and not a corporate, but a work-related social media presence. And I think there's not a perfect answer for how you navigate that. We don't have a set policy here at the campaign about what you can or cannot say online, but I think, you know, similar to how you would encourage folks to represent themselves out in the public sphere, this is just another dimension of the public sphere. So if we all just need to be conscious of that when we're posting things for Twitter. I might be posting something from my own private Twitter account, but if folks know that I work at the national campaign, it will certainly reflect well or poorly on my organization. So I just need to be conscious of that. And I think that that's something that we're just learning more and more about. Okay, another one that is kind of a long one, so I'm going to read it out. Our company wants to avoid a data breach and wants us to start a website that will increase our outreach numbers to young and older adults. They do confidential HIV testing, but does not want the social media website connected to the company's website. Tumblr seems to be the way to go for us because our target audience is more after hours. Any suggestions on how to create a social media website apart from our company's main website? I mean, one of the things you could do is just not link, and you could come up with a different Tumblr, you know, identification that wouldn't be necessarily specific to your companies. I'm assuming that you wouldn't have, if you would have any data on HIV results, that's very secure and HIPAA compliant and all of that stuff, because that's something that is really important. But one way is that you don't have to link the two, and that you would come up with a different name for your Tumblr.
And I think Tumblr is a really good option as well because you don't have to build a website. Tumblr is kind of out of the box, easily customizable, whereas if you needed to build a secondary, completely unattached website, that would require a budget. So Tumblr is a great opportunity for that. And I think you also could probably, if you use Tumblr as your primary social media presence website, you could add a Twitter and a Facebook that fed off of the Tumblr brand. In other words, you would just completely keep your original confidential data breach-free website separate from your Tumblr, which then also had a Twitter and a Facebook if you chose to do that.
And then I think we have time for one more question. What would be examples of results that are convincing signs to a manager or CEO that the investment in social media is paying off? And I think this goes back to the rubric that we were showing with, you know, how will I know if I'm successful? It's sort of, I would recommend strongly that you set up some benchmarks for what, you know, you're setting up your objectives for what you want to achieve, and then your benchmarks for how you are measuring those objectives. So to Jessica's earlier point, you know, if you're seeing steady growth, if you're seeing, you know, good interaction between your participants, I think that those are outcomes that you can take back to your boss and say, here's where we are, and this is, you know, the kind of return on investment that we're having.
And I think that's also, Katy's talking a lot about setting goals, and I think, number one, you do need to have some buy-in from your CEO. It may be a bit of an uphill battle, but you need to get a little bit of buy-in from the beginning, and then you start the program with some goals, and then you can go back and say, look at how many new followers we have, look at the engagement that we've got, look at how much conversation we're getting, look at how many teens we've reached this week that we never would have touched before. Those are the kinds of things that I think are really compelling for bosses.
And certainly if you have other data that are like, you know, we're getting 20 or an X number of teens signing up for our programs that we never had before, and they're hearing about it through this platform. Or, you know, you can add these social media sites as a, if you already asked people, like, how did you find out about us, and you have started a new social media site, you could add that as a slot on your questionnaire. And, or if you're getting, you know, more people coming to your programs, or if your goal is retention, and you've created a closed group, and you're seeing your retention increase from, you know, 70% of your participants to 80% of your participants. I think those are good measurable goals that I would be certain to, you know, share. Yeah. So I think we've come to the end of our time. Our contact information is on the slide. Feel free to be in touch if you have any other specific information, and follow us.
Definitely follow us. All right, well, thanks for everyone for your participation, and as Katie said, feel free to be in touch if you have any questions that we weren't quite able to get to.